Think carefully before you push the button under your choice for the correct answer. This series of programs is about a branch of mathematics called algebra. Like any subject, it can be made difficult to study, and there are some advanced parts of algebra that are hard to understand until you learn the basics. But the things you need to know about algebra for ordinary use are easy to learn. This is what we'll cover in this course. Algebra uses a group of methods to help you solve problems about the relations between things, which may be a bit too complicated just to keep in your head. You can write these relations down and arrange them so that you can solve the problem, or at least you can show the relationships in the simplest possible form. Suppose your cousin Charles is 24 years old. You could use the letter C for his age and write C equals 24. This doesn't help us very much, since this is an identity. C and 24 are the same thing, like 5 equals 5. But if we didn't know that C is 24, the use of the letter C for his unknown age could be helpful. We'll show you why. Suppose you remember that 3 years ago, Charles had his 21st birthday. How old is he now? A simple equation would be C equals 21 plus 3. And we would easily solve this equation for C. How old is Charles now? Push the button under the answer. Of course, 24. But suppose Charles was 10 years old when his sister Betty was born. How old is Betty now? Her age is 10 years less than Charles. We could say that B equals C minus 10, using B for Betty's age. And if C is 24, then B equals 24 minus 10, which makes B equal 14. How old is Betty? Correct. These problems are, of course, quite simple, but you can imagine that equations in algebra may be used to solve quite complex problems. In algebra, we use letters and other symbols to stand for an unknown quantity. In algebra, what would you mean by B or C, or X or Y? Yes. In algebra, we could add, subtract, multiply, and divide expressions with these symbols just as in arithmetic. We should be careful about one matter, however, for since the letter X is often used in algebra for an unknown quantity, we can't use it any longer as an arithmetic sign for multiplying. Instead, we may use a space and a raised dot between numbers, or we can use brackets or parentheses. Thus, 2.3 means 2 times 3. And so does 2 next to a 3 in parentheses. What is the value of this expression? When you multiply numbers which are represented by letters or symbols, you don't need a raised dot or parentheses to show multiplication. For example, you may write xy equals 6, and if y stands for 3, you know that x is 2. What does pi b stand for? Yes. Letters which represent unknown or variable numbers are shown just like arithmetic numbers in algebra when you add, subtract, or divide, except that generally we avoid the division symbol with a bar and a dot above and below it. Instead, we use the horizontal line, which is used for fractions to separate numerator and denominator. The expression on the top is divided by the term or expression below the line. Here's a hint which may save you some trouble. Try to avoid expressing a division operation by saying divide 3 into 27 or divide y into x. It's always less confusing to say 27 divided by 3 or x divided by y or even 27 over 3 or x over y. In algebra, brackets or parentheses allow you temporarily to treat an expression with more than one term just as if it had only one term. For example, x plus 3 can be enclosed in parentheses, and then multiplied by a number or letter as if it were one term. How could you show the quantity x plus 3 multiplied by y? Right. Show how the product of A times the quantity B plus 2 would look. Right. Another way to show the product of A times the sum of B plus 2 would be to multiply a times each of the terms. That is, a times b, then plus a times 2. This would then give us ab plus 2a. Notice that for convenience we arrange the letters which are multiplied in alphabetical order. Also, to avoid confusion, we like to put numbers first in product terms. One law in algebra is the commutative law, which says that 3 plus 2 is the same as 2 plus 3, and 3 times 2 is the same as 2 times 3. This law works for addition and multiplication, but would it be correct to say that 3 minus 2 is the same as 2 minus 3, or 3 divided by 2 is equal to 2 divided by 3? Right. The associative law of addition and multiplication tells us that when you add 2 plus 3, then add 4, you get the same answer as when you add 2 to the sum of 3 plus 4. Also, you may multiply 2 by 3, then later multiply the product by 4, to get the same result as if you multiplied 2 times the product of 3 and 4. What's the name of this law? By these algebraic laws, we know that a plus b, in parentheses, plus c outside them, is the same as a plus b plus c inside parentheses. This means you can either add a and b first, then c, or add b and c, then a. Also, a times the product of b times c is the same as the product of a times b times c. According to the associative law, it doesn't matter in which order you multiply. However, subtraction and division operations must stay in order. Which law allows addition or multiplication operations in any combination? There's another law of algebra called the distributive law, which concerns the combination of addition and multiplication, and is a bit harder to remember. A little practice will help, however. The distributive law tells us that 2 times the sum of 1 and 3 can be calculated either by multiplying 2 times 1, then 2 times 3, then adding the products, or by adding 1 and 3 and multiplying 2 times the sum. Here we perform both addition and multiplication. What's the name of this new law? Right. If we multiply 2 times pi times a times b, we would write it as 2 pi ab. This is called a single term. You can see there are no plus or minus or any other arithmetic operation signs, because the grouping implies multiplication in algebra. When we write 2 pi over ab, we mean that 2 and pi are multiplied together, and then divided by the product of a and b. What would you call 3 times 4? Yes. When an algebraic expression has more than one term, it is called a polynomial. There is a special word used for a polynomial with just 2 terms, like 2x plus 3y. What would you guess it's called? Of course. You remember that we use the parentheses to enclose several terms so they can be treated as one quantity, like b plus 2 inside parentheses. When we wish to show that this binomial, b plus 2, is multiplied by something else, we use the parentheses and indicate, for example, a times b plus 2 by writing a parentheses b plus 2. We could remove the parentheses by multiplying a times each term in the binomial. In this case, we would have ab plus 2a. Look this over carefully before you push the center button to go on. Let's say that we were looking at a family album, and Betty showed us a picture of Charles and herself taken a few years before. At that time, Betty said she was half as old as Charles. If B is Betty's age when the picture was taken, and C stands for Charles' age at the time, what would be a true equation statement? Right. We could also say that Charles' age was twice Betty's, or C equals 2B. Let's write another equation about Charles and Betty's ages. Charles is 10 years older than Betty. How would you say this in algebra? Correct. But before we go ahead, we'd better remember that although Betty will always be 10 years younger than Charles, there was only one time when she was half as old as Charles. You can probably guess that this was when she was 10 and Charles was 20 years old, so perhaps you don't need algebra to find when the snapshot was taken. But what if we found that Betty was 7/12 as old as Charles when he went to work at the post office? Algebra would help to find their ages easily. If one morning you sold a customer 2 pounds of apples and 3 pounds of carrots, another customer 4 pounds of apples and 1 pound of bananas, and a third customer 2 pounds of bananas and 5 pounds of carrots, how much did you sell altogether? You could say 2A plus 3C for the first customer's apples and carrots, then 4A and 1B for the second customer, then 2B and 5C, and so on. Obviously, you could combine the same kinds of fruit and vegetables for your total sales that morning. If you didn't mix apples and bananas, what would you have as an algebraic sum? If you found 5 walnuts and 7 pecans in the woods, and gave your friend 3 pecans and 2 walnuts, what would you have left? Let X stand for walnuts and Y for pecans. Right. You must be sure to add or subtract only like terms. You remember a term in algebra is just one letter or number, or if there is more than one letter or number, they are all multiplied together. There are no addition or subtraction operations within an algebraic term. Like terms are those in which all the letters are the same, even though the numbers may be different. 2AB and 3.6AB are like terms. 4xy and pi xy are like terms, since pi is a fixed number. But you can't add 4xy and 2x plus 3y and then combine any terms. Which of these is correct? If you wish to know the number of square inches in a floor tile 10 inches long by 12 inches wide, you'd multiply 10 by 12 and get 120 square inches. If you had a number of tiles, some 9 inches square and some 7 inches square, you'd have some tiles which covered 81 square inches and others which covered 49 square inches. Any number multiplied by itself can be represented by the number with a small 2 at its top right. Thus, x times x is called x squared and is written like this. X times x times x is called x cubed, or sometimes x to the third power. In algebraic terms, it would be awkward to write 2xxxx, so we say 2x to the fourth power, or 2x to the fourth. These small numbers at the upper right are called exponents. You can see, however, that 3x and 2x squared are not the same kind of terms, so they can't be combined by addition to give 5x or 5x squared. They can be added, of course, but only as separate terms. What would their sum look like? Right. What would you call 2x squared plus 3x? You remember that when you multiply 2 times 3 to get 6, we call 6 their product. X times y gives the product xy. X and y are called the factors of the term xy. In the term 3xy squared, 3x and y are the factors. And the factor y, of course, occurs twice. What are the factors of 7ab to the third power? How would you show the sum of 2x and 4x plus 3? How would you show the sum of x plus 2 and y plus 3? How would you show the product of 2 and 3y? Remember, a product is the result of multiplication. How would you show the product of 2a and 3b? What's the product of 3 times the binomial 2x plus 3y? What's the product of 5 times the binomial 2x plus 3y? In algebra, what does x usually represent?